December 27, 1983. Re-recording on cassette tape from a reel-to-reel tape recording by John J. Herrera and Gus C. Garcia in San Antonio, Texas, at the Alexa Studio on January 28, 1954, for KLVL Radio Morales. John J. Herrera, gentlemen and the radio-listening public. I have the honor of presenting to you the distinguished attorney, Gustavo C. Garcia, who represented the case of Pete Hernandez against the state of Texas before the Supreme Court in Washington. Before you and at the microphone, Attorney Garcia, Gus C. Garcia. Thank you very much, Mr. De La Garza. Mr. Alejo De La Garza is an old fighter. Old in the sense of his years of struggle, not his age, because he is relatively young, who for many years has helped us and collaborated disinterestedly in our struggle against discrimination and segregation. Ladies and gentlemen, citizens of Houston, of Fort Bend County, of Baytown, and other surrounding places in East Texas. I want to give a brief report regarding the case of Pete Hernandez against the state of Texas, which was recently aired before the Supreme Court of the nation in Washington. In this case, the point we were alleging was that it is a violation of the Constitution of the United States that in Jackson County, as in many other counties, more than 50 in the state of Texas, persons of Mexican origin are denied, solely because of their national origin, the right to participate as members of grand juries and petit juries in those counties. That, in essence, is the essential point of the Pete Hernandez case. Let us pray to God that we triumph, that the Supreme Court of the nation proves us right. But first of all, since this transmission or electrical transcription is going to be broadcast by the radio station KLVL, owned by the Honorable Mr. Felix H. Morales, I want to express our deepest gratitude to Mr. Morales, all his staff, and his distinguished wife for their kindness in allowing this broadcast. My main task, though for me it is a pleasure, is to present to you a person whom you know perfectly well, who has distinguished himself by his civic-mindedness and his spirit of struggle. I had the honor of collaborating with him when this case was first aired, when things were very difficult in Jackson County 2.5 years ago. Unfortunately, when I arrived in San Antonio, I expected the whole town to arrive with me, along with this distinguished lawyer from Houston, Texas, but his problems and his business did not allow it. So we had to give him a greeting over the radio station KEXX, owned by Mr. Manuel D. Leal, and say to him, "We regret, our brother, that you are not with us." But now he is indeed with us here in San Antonio. I present to you a great friend, a great spirit, the former national president of LULAC, the esteemed legal consultant and leader of the Mexicans in East Texas, my good friend and pal, Attorney John J. Herrera of Houston. John J. Herrera. Thank you very much, Attorney Gustavo Garcia. I just want to say to the radio-listening public that it was a great honor for me and one of the most solemn and happiest moments of my life to be with Attorney Garcia and Attorney Carlos Cadena, Professor Cadena of St. Mary's University here in San Antonio. It was an honor to hear their words that for the first time were heard in the Supreme Court of the United States in Washington in favor of the Mexican-American in Texas, who for so many years has struggled here in Texas. We have helped our great country in war and in peace. We have given our lives and our efforts to enlarge our republic, and yet, despite all that, we were humiliated, discriminated against, and segregated. In the moments I heard your words, Attorney Garcia, and those of Carlos Cadena before the Supreme Court, before the 9 justices of the Supreme Court, it gave me great pleasure and pride to see 2 Mexican Americans fighting in the High Court against the discrimination that for so many years we in LULAC and the GI Forum have fought. In the hour of truth, hearing you and Attorney Cadena answer the questions the judges were asking about racial prejudice against us Mexicans in Texas, it gave me great pride to know that we Mexican Americans are capable in the courts, just as we are on the battlefields. At the same time, I thought of all our boys who gave their lives and their blood on the battlefields, and that we in LULAC and the GI Forum fought and told those who segregated us that it was not just to treat us that way. Now, Attorney Garcia, I hope that in a month or 6 weeks they give the judgment in our favor. After the cause was heard, I know that many people there, journalists and people who have heard many cases before the Supreme Court, gave their opinion that you and Attorney Cadena had given a very formidable argument in favor of our cause. The only thing we Mexican Americans here in Texas can do is wait for the moment of victory. Now, Attorney Garcia, what do you think? What have you heard of the judicial opinions touching on the case of Pete Hernandez against the state of Texas? Gus C. Garcia, attorney, it is very difficult for me to make comments on that point because I do not want to be too optimistic and then suffer the disappointment of a defeat, which is very possible because in what is most certain there is doubt. However, we think we have justice on our side. We think that with a great talent like that of attorney and Professor Carlos Cadena, heading the appeals, and, modesty aside, with the work you and I did when airing the case in Jackson County, with the great help of your very competent and skillful assistant, Attorney James DeAnda, who carried himself like a real man, I believe with all of this on our side and the help of God, we must triumph. Now, when you said, Attorney Herrera, that it gave you pleasure that 2 Mexicans argued and presented the case, there weren't 2, there were 3. You will remember that you were by our side before the 9 magistrates of the Supreme Court, and although it was not your turn to present the arguments verbally, you helped us infinitely with your moral and legal help, with the comments and notes you passed us, and with the statistics you prepared as the questions were asked. I appreciate the fact that organizations like LULAC, the GI Forum, and the Texas Good Neighbor Relations Association, headed by the distinguished Dr. Carlos Castañeda of Austin, and also by the great fighter, Attorney Alonzo Perales of San Antonio, participated. Also, the Pan American Progressive Association, headed by Mr. Jose Olivares, and all the people of Corpus Christi, San Antonio, Wharton, Baytown, and Houston, who helped us financially. I appreciate being able to have told the magistrates of the Supreme Court, who were perhaps a bit confused as to whether we were all wetbacks in Jackson County, Houston, San Antonio, and other places. Let us remember that in the East, in New York, in Washington, and those places, they do not understand our problems. They do not know us. They do not know of the 3 million Mexicans that exist in the Southwest. I repeat, I appreciate the honor I had in telling them, gentlemen, here we have as our colleague before this Supreme Court a young lawyer from Houston, Attorney Herrera, who represents the 10th generation of Americans, or Texans, whose great-great-grandfather signed, along with another Mexican Texan, the Declaration of Independence of Texas against his own blood, not because he hated his brothers of race, but because he was against the dictatorship of Santa Anna. That is why it was a great pleasure to work with you, John. It was a great satisfaction to participate in this case and tell the truths to the magistrates of the Supreme Court in Washington, who have very broad and comprehensive minds. And when you tell the dear public that it was a satisfaction for you to hear those words from our lips, remember, John, that neither you, nor Carlos Cadena, nor I have ever lacked words to defend our rights. We do not have hair on our tongues to say it to them in Washington, or to Governor Shivers in Austin, or to whomever, whenever it is necessary and justice is on our side. Ladies and gentlemen, to say goodbye, thank you very much once again. You can be proud of your neighbor, your friend, and faithful servant, Attorney John Herrera. And to finish, let us say what we said in San Antonio at the airport. It is true that we participated in this case without money, we can say on the basis of hunger, but it is very important that we remember that those of us who boast of being men of principle, who are ready to fight against injustice and in favor of human justice, that we must also be ready, Attorney Herrera, to see our dear mothers and our estimable wives and our children sometimes lack the necessities of life, and if necessary, do as the great Gandhi of India did, go even to jail in defense of our principles. Thank you very much.